To the Public Service Board Overall and Scrutiny Committee, and before we like to welcome everyone, and I'm never sure which way round I go when it says before we proceed, can we all introduce ourselves? I'll go that way round this today, shall I? I can see you all on there. If you'd like to introduce yourself, I think that might be the first thing to do, and then we'll go through the formal proceeding.
Okay, Chair, shall I start?
Yes, please.
I'm Helen Deakin, Scrutiny Officer supporting PSB scrutiny. Councillor Seaborn.
Councillor Rose Seaborn. I'm the Education Scrutiny Chair.
Councillor Peter Jones.
Good morning all. I'm Councillor Peter Jones.
You're muted, Pete.
You're muted.
Sorry, that's a good start.
It's good.
Still
Yeah.
muted.
Still muted. Sorry. Is that? Can you hear me now?
Yes.
I'll start again. I do apologise. I'm Councillor Peter Jones. I'm Chair of the Cleaner and Greener Scrutiny Committee.
Richard. I'll do this now. Sorry, I get them.
I'm Councillor Richard Overton, and I'm Chair of Healthier Communities Scrutiny Committee.
Gwyn.
Councillor Gwyn Jenkins, I'm Chair of the Prosperous Communities.
Rose, have we had you already? Yes, we have Rose, haven't we?
Yeah.
Thank you, Rose. You're more used to this than me. Sarah.
Hi, everyone. Sarah Bees, Policy Partnerships and Equalities Manager.
Emma.
Hi, Emma Davis-McIntosh. I work in the Iron Bevan Public Health Team as the Integrated Wellbeing Network Lead.
And Lyndon. I can see you on there.
Anybody had a PSH?
Thank you, Lyndon. And our person who keeps everything together today. Geraint, I can see you.
I didn't know if you meant me then, Chair. Geraint Thomas, Democratic Services.
I think, have we got anybody else on here as well today?
Yeah, we've got Andrew Osborne.
Are you there, Andrew?
Yeah, here I am. Up in Pontypool Park, it looks like. But yeah, Andrew Osborne, Torvine. So I manage the Environmental Street Scene Service for Torvine, and I've been working on Objective 1 with Debbie from the Fire Service.
And I look like I got Catherine on here as well. I can see who we got on here.
We've got
Hello.
Yeah, I'm here as well, but I'm just sitting in to check that everything is going right because Helen hasn't done one of these meetings on Teams before. So I'm just sitting in the background for a while.
Right, well, thank you for that, because it's always useful to know who we got on these Teams meetings, and chairing it is a strange occupation. Right, and then, right, go on.
We've got Derry Jones.
Derry Jones, hello.
Hi, Chair. Derry Jones from South Wales Fire and Rescue Service.
I know you, yes, sorry to do. Right.
I'm here with Andrew to discuss the Objective 1 element of the PSB plan.
Have I missed anybody? No, there's a deafening silence there. That's brilliant. Thank you for that. It's rather important on this because we don't know who we have otherwise. Right, I'm going to go through the other aspect of this, which says welcome introduction. That's the welcome induction. We know who everybody is. And I'd just like to remind members that the meeting can be viewed live by members of the public and press today. Therefore, I welcome anybody that might be welcoming. A recording of this meeting will be made available with the Council's YouTube after the meeting has concluded, should anybody wish to view it. Just to confirm, we, as a Council, welcome the use of the Welsh language with public meetings, but I confirm I have not received any notifications to use Welsh today. Therefore, the meeting will be conducted in English only. As a reminder, I may remind members that refrain from using the chat facility, instead using the raised hand. I'm sure we all know how to use that now. If you want to speak, I've got this panel on here. I should be able to see it. So thank you very much. Please, you keep your microphones muted when not talking, so there aren't any interruptions encountered. Moving on to the agenda, could Geraint Thomas, our Democratic officers, confirm that whether we have received any apologies, please?
Thank you, Chair. No apologies. All 5 members of the committee are here in attendance.
Well, thank you very much. That's brilliant. Next item on the agenda is declarations of interest. Have we got from what I can gather with this, we probably don't need to do that because we I don't know who's going to be advising me on that, Helen.
We're non-decision making, and all the reports are past tense reports that are just reporting on things that have happened. So there shouldn't be any declarations of interest today.
If you feel moved that you should do anywhere in the proceedings, please inform myself or Helen and myself and Helen if you feel that there is somewhere where you think that should happen. But have you heard that? Anybody got any comments before we proceed on that matter? Thank you very much. That's brilliant. Right. Item number 3 is declarations of minutes. You've all read those minutes. Like, from what I can see, we're not going to be able to sign them. Oh, can we sign them off? Because the only people in attendance, as far as I can see on that, were myself, Janet Jones and Jessica Powell. So there's only one person that was actually at that meeting. So can we mark that as read by people, but not ability to sign it off? I don't know. How do we proceed on that, Helen?
Yeah, that's fine. We can do that.
Yes. So everybody has. Can somebody propose that they've read it?
Yes. And I move the minutes.
Pardon?
I move the minutes, Chair.
Thank you, Rosemary. I think that's the only way we can go ahead with that one. Right. So that's great. Number 4 is action sheet. Where are we with that, please?
So we had on the 23rd of January 2020, we looked at the Green Infrastructure Strategy. The recommendations are sent out that the committee made to relevant officers. Those responses have been received and they've been communicated to the members of that committee on the 11th of March 2020. So that action is delivered.
Brilliant. Any further comments on that one? I remember that one well. Right, thank you very much indeed. Let's get on with why we're here today, which is agenda item number 5 on the report, joint report from Torfaen Public Services Board and the Gwent Regional Partnership on Tackling Loneliness. And I believe we've got the report's author here. Would you like to, I presume you have a bit you'd like to introduce this, and I think the normal way in which we would do this, you have an introduction, we then got a series of questions which I would gently allocate to members of the team because they're highly experienced asking these questions, and then you and your colleagues can answer them. That's the normal procedural way, unless anybody else has got any other ideas of how they like to tackle this. I think that's a reasonable way of doing it. We've got some pre-questions, and looking at the list, we've got about up to 15. I know members like to ask supplementaries when things occur to them, so we could be here for probably on this one, we'll give it a good hour and a half or something. But anyway, see how we go. So if you'd like to do your intro and your colleagues as you see fit on it, we give you a good 10 minutes or so on this, and then we'll get into the meat of the matter. Over to you, Sarah.
Thank you, Chair.
Yeah.
So just to add a little bit of context to this report, it was originally asked to be completed towards the end of 2019, with the intent to bring to Scrutiny Committee around March time in 2020. Due to the pandemic, it was put on hold, and it was then hoped to be brought later in 2020 as things have progressed and things have been made more difficult due to the pandemic and then the election. We are now here quite a significant period of time later to present the reports. So really for me, I would just like to highlight that this is a particular snapshot point in time. It's highlighted a significant amount of work that is going on around the loneliness agenda across quite a few different partners in the local authority. We know that the pandemic has only caused further issues around loneliness and has actually increased its importance for us to be working towards tackling loneliness. And And my recommendation today would be that we now complete a more focused paper on the impact of the pandemic on loneliness, and we bring that to you at a later point in this year, which will give you further up-to-date, more relevant information.
Thank you very much. Do your colleagues want to add anything, or are they just here to answer questions when you're here? How would you want to play that one, Sarah?
So my colleagues are here to support, but by all means, if Emma, is there anything to add from your perspective?
Nothing to add at this point, no.
So anybody else at all while you're here? It's your chance to say something at the beginning. That's all right.
That my other colleagues are here for the PSB annual reports.
Okay, no, we'll leave it like that and we'll get on with it. Colleagues from council, I will endeavour to go round allocating a question. I don't think there's any particular way in which we do this. I'll start with Peter for question number 1. I think that was one of yours. And then go to Rosemary for the next question.
Thank you, Chair. I'll give you the page number reference so we know which bit of the report I'm talking about. The first bit we're looking at is on page 20, paragraph 4.2. And my question is, why aren't and I think you may have answered this, Sarah, slightly already in your opening remarks, but I'm going to still ask the question. Why aren't the PSB and the regional partnership plans more aligned specifically around loneliness? And will this be addressed in the next planning cycle?
Yeah, so as I said, because this piece of work was originally asked to be completed in 2019, we're now a significant period of time later where we're working on, I know our colleagues in the Regional Partnership Board are currently refreshing their population needs assessment. So their plans are very much going to be refocused. And from a PSB perspective, we have highlighted in our meetings that our wellbeing objectives are even more relevant at this point in time, and loneliness very much is part of our objectives. So I think that probably once the PNA is completed and our work in the PSB continues, you'll see a further alignment.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Any supplements on that at all? No. Rosemary, next one, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'm referring to page 21 and it's paragraph 5.2. And how will the focus of tackling loneliness, mostly for the older generation, be changed to include the younger generation and population? We hear a lot about young people being quite lonely these days.
Yeah, I think that when we complete further work to look at the impact of COVID, that we're going to see an increase in loneliness in younger people. It's something that we need to be aware of. I think that use of technology is something that really helps us in terms of connecting with younger generations. And there's been a lot of work with our colleagues in the Health Board around mental health, which I think will also support some of those issues that are experienced by younger people.
As a personal issue, becoming a great grandparent during the pandemic, I notice the young mums who've actually been pregnant and had babies during that period are actually having significant issues with regard to the loneliness and actually joining in with other groups of young mums.
Right, any more questions on that one?
Lyndon's got his hand up, Chair.
Lyndon?
If I could just come in.
Sorry, I should be looking, Linda.
No, it's no problem. Congratulations comes to Sibo, and on becoming a great grandparent. I became a grandparent, so I totally can associate with what you've said there, because my daughter struggled as well in terms of meeting up with mums and babies groups as they're well established across all of the areas, and I think you've hit a pertinent point there in terms of how we look at loneliness across the piece, rather than just traditionally we think of older people being in that category rather than younger. Just going back to the earlier question, when Councillor Jones raised the issue of the closer planning between the RPB and the PSB, that does go on now. We do a lot of work with Phil Diamond, who's a representative on the RPB that sits on our Gwent group. So we do try and align those strategies where we can, and also try to pick up any new nuances that are coming through in terms of different legislations coming through. Because so Wellbeing of Future Generations looks at communities, the Social Services and Wellbeing Act looks at the person. So both of those need to be aligned. But I think it's a really good, pertinent point, and a point that we will need to take forward, as Sarah mentioned, that the refocus now as we move from response in terms of COVID into the more recovery elements of COVID. You know, I think we're going to have a huge mountain to climb once we understand what the impacts, particularly those who have less of a family support, or have less of a general friendship circle, and of those that have a lower income, will be more disproportionately impacted, I think, as we go along. So I think that's a very good question for us to take forward into understanding what that actual impact is going to be. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Anybody else, any supplementaries? I've got one. It struck me immediately. You said this report was written before pandemic. You've got a set of factors you identify on question 2, and obviously loneliness across the piece. What's apparent then? I mean, it's an obvious question, but it's worth asking. What was apparent then, and obviously what is apparent after pandemic? How can you identify what was the norm, if you like, and what has been exacerbated by pandemic, and how you can measure it? It seems an obvious question to ask, but are we measuring it, and what's the data on it?
Well, I think that something that the pandemic has done has only increased inequalities in our local communities. And as an effect of that, we're seeing increases in loneliness. Yeah. So, for example, groups of people who maybe have lost their jobs due to the pandemic, have lost a major social factor in their lives, and may now be suffering from loneliness, whilst pre-pandemic they wouldn't have been. So I think that when you look at things like job losses or community groups that aren't able to meet, you know, a perfect point today is in young parents. The fact that pre-pandemic they would have been able to go to mother and baby groups and different community things like that. We're now living in a time where those things aren't possible. So I think that in terms of measuring it by data, that might be slightly more difficult, but we can measure it by making the assumptions that there's less social contact, and therefore there's going to be an increase in loneliness.
That isolation, yeah, no, I mean, yeah, it was how you get the data, how you compare one with the other, because obviously isolation in certain parts of our borough, you know, because of transport issues, and then it's exacerbated because you can't get on the transport. Although yesterday people have gone back to whatever normal was, or normal-ish. It's those sort of examples. If you're a person that doesn't have access to a vehicle because you're not wealthy enough to own one, so examples like that. I mean, that's where data is available, stuff like that. So it's being, you know, how do you distinguish between one or the other? Because people have always not been able to have that stuff because of where they live or what their level of wealth is. So I've just asked that question because I thought it was really interesting. You've done it before and then been able to adapt this to the situation we're in now. I thought that was quite a reasonable answer there. Okay, question number 3 is Richard Overton, please. You all right with it, Richard?
Just unmuting myself, Chair.
Yeah.
The reference is page 23, paragraph 5.4. It feels as if you need to fit into a category. For example, eligibility for a social care assessment to receive support for loneliness. People don't necessarily fit into categories. How will you reach people who need support but are currently unknown or not eligible for services?
Yeah, I think that's a really, really valid and interesting point, because there's a lot of people in our local communities that maybe don't meet thresholds for formal services, but are actually dealing with issues around things like loneliness. I think that during the pandemic, it's made things even more difficult when you think about things like public engagement, because we can't actually go out and speak to people like we've been able to in the past, and maybe collect that information out on the street, to get a better understanding of what's going on for day-to-day people. But I think what's important is that we are communicating to the communities around us the support services that are in place, so that people who maybe don't need to access a formal service or need to receive a social care assessment, for example, can actually access information and support via other means. So platforms such as Dawis, I think, would be really helpful in those instances where someone could go online and have a little look at what's going on in their community and seek further support.
Any supplements on that? Any further questions on that one? Okay. Next question, Gwyn, please. Jenkins.
Question 5, page 26, paragraph 7. What specifically has the PSB been doing? What new funding has been secured, and what impact has activity had?
Well, I think that, as we'll see from our later agenda item, there's been a lot of activity within the PSB world in the last 12 months. And loneliness appears across our objectives. So it's something that is very much a focus for the PSB. And the annual report demonstrates the progress that's been made against each of the objectives. In terms of funding, do you mean funding specifically towards loneliness as an issue?
Can you help me on that one, Ellen?
Yes, that's exactly what Councillor Jenkins is referring to.
Okay.
Yes.
And I think that when it comes to funding regarding objectives, we haven't got one objective that sits under loneliness. It appears as a theme throughout a number of different objectives. And so we wouldn't have one specific funding stream just to work to loneliness. It would very much be that it would feed in amongst a number of objectives.
Okay, anybody got any further on that? Peter?
Yeah. Thanks. Yeah, I just want to explore this a little bit more. I think what we're trying to get at here, and we'll pick this up later in the agenda when we look at the annual report of the PSB, there's a lot of good activity going on by the partnership members of the PSB, but I get the feeling a lot of this activity, and even the loneliness activity, would have happened even if there wasn't a PSB. So we're trying to tease out where's the added value coming from the PSB, and we'll pick up later on the funding activity and the shared funding. That's not specific to loneliness. I think we look at that when we look at the annual report of the PSB, but the operational activity, I get a feeling a lot of this would have happened with the partners without the PSB. So I'm trying to tease out where's the added value come in.
Could I address that, Chair? Thank you, Councillor Jones. I suppose the added value comes from it has actually been it's a coordinated approach. We often see themes and directives coming out of all forms of government that have different departments really putting out similar themes and having the ability to use the PSB to be coordinating that, as part of this loneliness agenda. It includes all partners across the PSB, so they were all involved in it, rather than the health service going down one avenue. We would have the local authority, perhaps social services division, looking at a different avenue. So I suppose from my perspective, the added value that the PSB brings to it is that it helps enable and coordinate and reduces the opportunity for duplication across other services coming in and perhaps replicating the same work. This is why we have such a close relationship with the RPB, and we have the RPB sat on our Gwent strategic group, so that we don't end up doing similar types of work and duplicating that type of work. So that's where I feel the real benefit comes in. And if I could just address the issue of funding, the PSB is a non-funded body. It only receives funding for those grants that it's successful in securing, and a reliance then on partner contributions to those schemes that it wants to take forward as a public service board. So it's a different setup than other statutory boards such as the RPB. So sometimes, to be honest, I feel as if the PSB is a poorer partner within the whole structures across Wales, because despite our remonstrations to Welsh Government on a number of issues, including some core funded elements to get things done that would bring it more in line with other statutory boards, we're still very much, I think, the poor relation in terms of funding.
Okay, thank you.
Peter, do you want to come back?
Yes, please.
I could see that.
We'll come back, Lyndon, to funding. I think when we look at the annual report rather than now, because I don't want to move off the loneliness agenda. You mentioned there, which is a good point you made, about reducing duplication and the coordination role. Can you give any specific examples of where the PSB has reduced duplication?
Absolutely. For the wellbeing assessment is a core example of where we've worked across Gwent to enable that we don't duplicate activity on either the local or the regional level unless there's specific differences in locality. So we plan together, so we don't have 5 different work streams running alongside other elements that aren't coordinated. We have 5 different wellbeing plans, and I'm got to be careful not to slip into agenda item 3 here as well.
I appreciate that.
Where we are, but certainly in terms of reducing the duplication, we don't duplicate the activity that's going on in the RPB. There's a real danger that unless we're that well coordinated, we could well be duplicating some of that activity because we're dealing with the same people.
Okay.
And the same.
Is that okay then, Peter?
Yes, thank you.
Right. Well, I'm going to go back to question 4. Gwyn, I think, took the other one. Question 4, page 23, paragraph 5.4 was, how well is the MELO website used? Do you have any visitor figures? I think Helen put this one up because you teased it out, didn't you, on that paragraph?
Yeah, if I could invite my my colleague Emma to help with this question.
All right, okay.
Yeah, thanks, Sarah. So my colleague Jackie Williams in the public health team is responsible for the rollout of MELO. And she has that data, but I didn't get notice of this question until this morning. But I can get that data for you. But I do know that the team is working really hard on getting as much feedback as possible for the site. And they've recently they've been engaging with young persons groups and older people on how accessible and navigable the site is. They've received really good feedback on the content of the site, but they've received some feedback that the search functionality could be improved. So they've started to look at that now. I think, for example, if you put anxiety in, then you have to search for that under a specific app or course or something. So they want to improve the functionality so that if you write in anxiety, it brings up all of the different options. So I can get you numbers on usage, but what I can say for certain is that they are responding to all of the feedback they get and they welcome any more.
I'm sorry about that. We obviously we take questions as we note that, and that I think that will be welcome. Can you note that, please, if you would, Helen? Thank you. Peter, you obviously respond.
Yeah. I just want to touch on mental health and loneliness. Now, obviously, mental health issues have been exacerbated by the pandemic, and the Welsh Government now, they've appointed, and it's a Torfaen member of the Senate, they've appointed a Minister for Mental Health Issues. So the question really is, I think this needs to be a major theme for the PSB going forward, and I think there'll be opportunities for some partnership and innovative working. Any thoughts on what will happen next on the mental health agenda with regard to the PSB?
Do you want me to come in from an AB perspective?
Yes, please. That would be really interesting.
So the Mental Health and Learner Disabilities Division have recently conducted a consultation on services across the patch in terms of the tiers of services. So Mello forms part of the Enhanced Foundation tier for mental wellbeing, and then the Mental Health and Learning Disabilities have done a consultation on the services right up to crisis support. So they're just responding to the consultation now in terms of recommendations for change across the system of mental health, ranging from early intervention and prevention to crisis support. So that's one that's worth looking out for, and I'm sure that will come back to PSB or RPP at some point for their kind of comments and thoughts on it. In relation to the Enhanced Foundation tier, which is really where all of our early intervention and prevention work sits, where our tackling loneliness stuff sits at the most basic level, and where the integrated wellbeing network stuff sits. There's a huge amount of work at the moment in relation to how do we provide information to people on the things that keep them well. So that includes the community activities that go on. How can we use platforms such as Dewis, Info Engine, Connect Torfaen to maximise the information to people? How do we reach people who are offline through notice boards, community centres, etc.? And how do we really make best use of all of those things going on in the community that keep people well? And there's a lot of work going on at PSB and RPP level around that.
Thank you, Peter.
Just so, what about working in coordination with the local authority social services department? How does that work?
So myself, I work closely with the social care department, as does the wider Torfaen Council Borough team, Torfaen Borough team for the health board, sorry. So those relationships are really strong. Social care colleagues and primary care colleagues are just resurrecting the Torfaen Integrated Partnership, the TIP, which is the group that discusses all health and social care issues for Torfaen. So Jill Pratlett, Head of Adult Services, and Ali Goff, who's the current Head of Place-Based Care in Torfaen, work very closely. So those relationships are really strong.
Okay. Can I just come back again, Chair, on one other issue, as we got a representative from the fire service here. The fire service do some marvellous work with older people, with fitting fire alarms, etc. When they find issues that worry them around this sort of thing, how do they feed that into the partners?
You're correct, and we do have a lot of interaction with those who are more, and particularly those who are older in the community. When we go out and identify individuals who are lonely, we then we can either carry out a POVA referral, or safeguarding referral, and we notify the social services of these individuals. So it's all about this integrated work that we do in the sharing of information to identify those who are most vulnerable within our society, and signposting them to the most appropriate department or organisation so they can have this help and assistance.
Right, thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Sarah, you've got your hand up. Sarah?
Thank you.
Yeah,
it was just in response to the question around mental health. I just wanted to highlight that we're in a position at the moment of starting work on the new wellbeing assessment. And I think that'll be really important in highlighting where our communities are in terms of mental health and what we need to be doing in the future to support it. So that'll be key in working out where we are.
I've got a slight supplementary here because I'm aware of it. What happens with non-PSB agencies that are predominantly working in the area? I'm thinking the job services, because I'm aware they might be across the piece and pick up things that you guys don't. How do you work with them? You know, the oh God, what are they called? The employment services. Because obviously they're across a lot of people, and they will pick up people that have only got mental health issues. So job seekers. Any thoughts on that?
Emma has a hand up, Chair.
Emma?
Yeah, so the job centre and all of the employability programmes that work across Torfaen are sort of they're structured within feeder groups to the PSB. So the Welfare Reform Partnership has been a big partnership for the last few years. They all sit around that table, and they also sit around the Torfaen Economic and Activity Group, the TEAG, and then they're part of our Integrated Wellbeing Network collaboratives within specific communities. So they sit around those tables, and then the people that sit on the PSB are fed that information. So they're definitely very much part of the partnership.
Right, thank you. Right, so next question. Rose Seaborn, question 6, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I perhaps need to declare an interest as a trustee of CoStar on this question, but I'm talking about page 27, para 7.9, and how and what input has the PSB had in developing and assessing the effectiveness of groups and clubs that are listed? We've had a lot of pop-up groups during the pandemic, and obviously the settled groups usually have some kind of reporting structure, but I just wondered what assessment is going on out there.
I think in terms of community groups, it's probably quite difficult to assess how useful they've been, but potentially a way of looking at that is to look at people who are in attendance. So firstly, how much attention it gets, how many people are coming to the groups, but then actually sounds like a negative, but could be a positive in that the people that then move on and don't need to attend anymore. So I would imagine that community groups will collect that information and report on it. And then if, as a PSB, if there's a particular area that we would have an interest in, our partnership networks mean that we could get in touch and ask that information if needed.
Rose?
Yeah, so we're not monitoring. We just my question was, what input has the PSB had in developing and assessing the effectiveness? So, you know, word of mouth is fine. If it's good, people will continue to carry on. But how do we actually monitor the groups that are out there? That's what I'm trying to get at.
I think that probably that falls into an operational element of the work rather than the setting of the strategic stuff, which the PSB does. And I guess, Lyndon or Emma, would we have any ideas of how we would manage that?
I mean, it's a really interesting question, because I'm not sure we've done any work at all on that, Councillor Seaborn, to be frank, in terms of the PSB having you know, looking at specific clubs and groups that have set up. It's been mainly around those well-being objectives, and whether any of those elements have actually fitted into the work plan of any of those overarching objectives. I mean, it could well be. We would also expect our partners to have Voluntary Alliance to be somewhere along the piece with that, in understanding as an umbrella organisation what support they've been doing. I mean, it's certainly something that we could take forward and try to look at, but you know, I can't really give you an answer other than I'm fairly certain we haven't done that type of work.
Emma?
I think it's actually a really difficult thing to do for a number of reasons, including the fact that some community centres and groups don't actually want to formalise their activities in any way. So they're not interested in collecting data and information. They're just interested in doing what they do for the benefit of the community. And I've worked with community groups for years, and you'll have those that are willing to work alongside public services and those that actually just want to be left to do their own thing. And I think, you know, there is a question around, is it appropriate for us to formalise and try and gather data on some of that stuff? or not really. And I think we will always have to accept that while some data will be available to us and we can use our third sector umbrella body and our other networks to do that, we'll have to accept that actually we don't want to over professionalize or over formalize what is just grassroots community activity doing amazing stuff.
I'm going to make a comment now, as somebody who spent 40 years in the voluntary sector. I'm astounded at your comments there, to be quite honest, because the amount of data that's in the voluntary sector, TVA does an enormous amount of this, and I know because I've been having conversations. You know, there's a whole network of halls out there because we've been doing it as community councils, and the reason we know it's out there is because the community councils have been working to maintain the hall network. We put money into it. Another minor partner of yours is the community council, so not minor partner really at all. You look at the amount of money it is put into halls in this borough. The amount of money that's gone through that. These statements are really interesting. I think maybe you do need to do some more work on this, and you need to do some more work on what TVA is doing, and you need to do some more work on the networks of community organisations. I mean, Rose's organisation has done an amazing amount of work through COVID. So have a lot of other organisations. They've all got data, and they all have to keep data for one very sound reason, which Emma probably recognises from my involvement and stuff in the past. Funders want to know it, and if you get any heritage lottery money whatsoever, they're more onerous than Torfaen Council and the Health Authority for data. So I'm astounded you actually said that. No, that you are right in some ways. Informal groups don't like it, but that they're very, very few. Most of them will keep a lot of data. It's not a thing we want to do. I remember Communities First was notorious for it. But at the end of the day, there's a hell of a lot of data out there if you want to mine it. And it's the reasons for doing it, I think, the bits you should worry about. So now I'm astounded you just said that.
I take your point on board, Stuart, but I also know that your yoga class or your toddlers group, they just want to do what they do, and they're not really interested. I have had experience of groups not wanting to engage with us, not wanting to share anything with us because they just want to do what they do. But I wasn't talking about the formal voluntary sector in that sense. I'm talking about very much that informal activity.
Sarah, and then followed by Lyndon.
Yeah, I just think for me, this particular question links to Councillor Overton's point that he made earlier about being really careful not to put people into boxes, because there's a whole host of groups in our local communities that provide very much light touch support, which I think, as Emma said, they're going to be people attending groups that maybe they don't want their data collected, they might come ad hoc, but it does provide that little bit of support that actually prevents people coming into formal services.
Yeah. Lyndon? I can't hear you.
Thank you, Chair. I nearly did the classic mute attack there. I charge our team £10 a time now and give it to charity. It's always interesting. I haven't had no money off them yet, man, but just in terms of just to give assurance to you as scrutiny chairs, TVA are an integral part of the PSB. They call
that's brilliant.
So they are involved in everything that we do, and we are always open to anything that TVA can offer to come forward to. Because to be quite frank, we don't know everything TVA does in the same way that other partners don't know what everything other partners do, but they are an integral part of the PSB. Just to give you some assurances around that.
I thought, thank you very much. I think this is quite an interesting area. There's some notes around this one particularly. Peter Jones, next question, number 7.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Question 7, it's page 28.
Chair, Richard had his hand up previously.
Oh, sorry, Richard, did I?
I'll stop, Richard.
Sorry, Richard, I didn't see your hand up there.
You're on mute, Councillor.
I can't hear you.
I don't wish to comment to it. I just wondered whether TVA is being discussed. I had to declare an interest as a member of the TVA board, that's all.
No, you're
Oh,
fine.
no,
We're non-decision
don't
making.
worry, Richard. I forgot you were on there. You've been on there for an awful long time as well.
Yeah.
I think that's okay. Peter.
Okay, thank you. I'll repeat myself. Page 28, paragraph 9.5. And my question is, while we acknowledge this is difficult to measure, what is being done to enable the PSB to assess if the activity being delivered is effective and making a difference, ensuring the right services are delivered? It's a little bit similar to what we were chatting about on that last question.
Yes.
Yeah, I think for me it's about making sure that we've got that constant communication with our local communities and we're listening to what they need. And in turn of listening, we are reacting with the right services and the right support structures for them.
Yeah, I think what we're trying to get out of this really is we want a flavour of what going forward the PSB will be doing to assess what's happening across the partnerships, if you like. I mean, one of the things that does come out in this report and the annual report in a minute is the lack of evidence, lack of data, which is something perhaps we can address. It's difficult not to move on to the next agenda item in part, but it's this, and a lot of our questions around this really is we need a little bit more data, a bit more evidence of what's effective.
Yeah, the data is quite a tricky one, and you'll see in one of the appendices of the annual report, we have got some indicators. Now, those indicators are Welsh Government indicators that we're able to access and lift Torfaen specific data for. The issue we have with that is that those indicators are collected not all at the same time and not every year. So, for example, there's a loneliness specific indicator in the PSB report you probably would have seen. But the dates on that mean that the last time that question was asked would have been, I think it was 2018-19, so 19-20, 2021 is missing. So that makes it quite difficult to measure from a data perspective. But you know, we try to use what we've got at the best of our ability. So the data that is out there, we try to access and use positively, but it is definitely an area that's quite difficult.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you.
I was going to ask a question. I hadn't looked on it for about a year or so, but Public Health Wales do seem to publish quite a lot of stuff. In fact, an enormous amount of stuff. Is there anything in there? I was about a year ago. I looked on their website, and obviously a lot of it is very specialist. I mean, I'm a bit of a data wonk, to be quite honest, but local stuff. You obviously got to pay for that. We did discuss the fact that council at one time used to have a system, but that's not anymore, which was really useful. There does seem an absence of collecting some of this data. Now, I feel for you in that way, but we still need data. The council one, when I first went on the council in 2012, there was a very, very effective one. We got rid of that in one of our moves. I'm sure Lyndon could give me a chapter and verse on that one because he probably knows the thing I'm on about. And that was extremely useful for members. But obviously raw data is not much use. It's the interpretation of it that's the problem. Can you comment on that if you like, Sarah, please? Yeah,
I think that, as you said, it is very much not just the data, it's the interpretation. I mean, part of the regional wellbeing assessment that we're currently just started, we've had a large amount of data provided to us by Data Cymru, which we can look at from both a regional and local level. And I guess as part of the wellbeing assessment, we're going to be conducting a lot of public engagement, which we will then be able to lift more information. And that'll be happening over the next year or so.
Lyndon?
I think a scrutiny, Chair, so you've raised a really relevant point because, evidence and data is a primary driver, isn't it, to things that we look at and go forward with. I do have some sympathy with Welsh Government over the provision of data over the last 18 months. I've been working fairly closely with them, and they've been single-mindedly focused on the pandemic in a similar way ABUHB and Public Health Wales has been as well. But Councillor Jones raises a really relevant point around it, and it's something. And I'm in danger of slipping into item 3 that's already on that key agenda item around evidence-based decision making using data to go forward with that. We've got lots of gaps, members. That's been without trying to make an excuse, that's been an outcome of some of the refocused work that all public services have had to do over the last 18 months. But the point isn't missed. It does need to be there. So we do agree with you certainly on that point, and I know it's something that the leader is very focused on here as part of his involvement in the PSB, and I'm already picking up that the incumbent chief executive is very data focused. So I think going forward we will have perhaps a more sturdier platform to work off than where we are now, and that's just an honest answer to you all.
Thank you. Thank you. So right, question number 8, if nobody's got anything more. Gwyn, could you go for that one, please?
Yep, I'm in. Right, let me just pull it up. Why is the PSB wellbeing plan measure percentage of people who are lonely not included in this report?
Yeah, so I thank you for that. I touched on that briefly in the previous answer. The reason it's not included in this particular report is because that information wasn't available for that time frame. It's based on the Welsh Government indicators that don't include all of those questions every single year. So because it wasn't the most up-to-date indicator, we didn't put it into the loneliness report.
Okay, is that anybody else ask questions on that one? That's a reasonably quick answer. Number 9, Richard. On to Appendix 2 now.
Yes, Stuart. Just bring up the question. Bring up the question on the screen a minute. Which of the activities listed would not have happened if the PSB had not been in existence?
Again, I think that we've probably discussed this in previous questions, in that what the PSB gives us is a coordinated response to what our communities need, and it gives us that network of being able to access a range of professionals to support our local communities. So even though we might all, and we do all have the same focus in improving the lives of our local communities, it stops us from duplicating the work, and it enables us to communicate more effectively across all of the partners.
Okay, any supplements on that, Peter?
Yeah, I think Sarah is absolutely right, Hugh. This is touching on and I think Lyndon answered this, the added value that the PSB brings. I mean, it felt like when we were reading Appendix 2, somebody had trawled through all the activities of the partnerships and just listed them. And we were trying to get a flavour of actually what is the PSB adding in terms of value. And
yeah.
Sarah, I think you're right. We don't need to go over that again. Lyndon has adequately answered the coordination type role of the PSB. But I do think that when the next reports are written, we need to give a little bit more emphasis about exactly what the PSB is bringing to the table, to avoid us asking these types of questions, perhaps.
Yeah. Sarah, do you want to come back on that, please?
Yeah, I think that's a great point that we'll definitely keep in mind for the next report. Thank you.
You also left a few out as well, was my comment. I found a few there, but you were bound to have done that one way or another, because we're on the ground and we know these things intimately. And it looks like Lyndon might want to add something there. I can see him. No, that's okay. Right, next question. Then I'm trying to move this on a little bit. Is me? Where am I? That was me. Well, it's me now. Question 10. Have the services and activities listed been evaluated for positive impact and value for money to inform further development, as there is no evidence provided? We're back to the evidence question now.
So I would say that each service, whether it's a project or a main service being run, will have its own form of evaluation, depending on which department or which partner is looking at that. So I think that probably each project that runs in local communities, because that could have its own paper evidencing its impact, which would then result in quite a hefty paper for you all to read. So I would imagine, as I said, that each particular project has its own method of evaluation, but wouldn't be included in this particular paper, because I think what this paper does is it just highlights that there's a lot of activity going on across the local authority area.
In other words, you said that's a snapshot.
Yes, a snapshot, exactly. This is what's going on at this point in time in the local communities.
Helen?
I just wanted to come in there, Chair. I think the rest of the questions you've had there have kind of previously been answered. So I think if you go to question 14 and 15.
Okay, thank you.
That would be okay. Yeah,
right. So on my little list then, I will bring in Peter Jones and Rose on those two. I try to keep it all in order, but it's I'm just going around the list of chairs here, brother. So Peter, next one.
Okay. I'm not me because I don't know Lyndon a tenor. So, my question is, how are you measuring the impact that each service is having on tackling loneliness? Is there a lack of this? We've asked this already. Is there a lack of measures, evidence, and aspiration targets for these services within the report? I think perhaps what we should be asking there now is, can we get some better targets going forward? Really.
Yeah, I think that maybe in the follow-up report we can look at some specific projects and go to those project leads and ask for their information that they've collected to evaluate them, and we can include that in the report, so give it more of an outcomes focus for you all.
Yeah.
Everybody okay with that? Right, Rose, you're gonna have number 15.
Yeah, I think it's finishing up on the topic we've been discussing, and question 15 is, what is the PSB's assessment of performance in this area based on the loneliness measure presented in the annual report?
Sorry, I've seen you doing that.
The loneliness measure in the PSB report, am I right in saying that percentage targets?
Yeah.
Is that the one you mean?
Yes.
Yeah, I guess that as a whole, as I said earlier, it feeds into a number of the objectives. Hopefully the Welsh Government indicator of loneliness will come out next year, which we'll be able to look at. But in all honesty, with the effect of COVID, it's more than likely that that's going to increase, not because our services haven't been effective, but because of the situation that we've all had to live in for the last 18 months. And I think that in terms of effectiveness of outcomes, that's definitely something that we will need to look at now moving forward, to see if there is a way of us effectively measuring things on a local level.
Okay.
Reasonable. Thank you. Darry, do you want to come in?
Yes, please. Just going back to Councillor Jones's question 14, about data. Fire service, and I'm sure with many other organisations, we have lots of information to identify who are most vulnerable within the Torfaen area, and subsequently we would target those individuals for whole life safety checks and education. The reason being that we have data to indicate that those individuals who are older and living on their own are more at risk from accidental dwelling fires.
Wow.
When you're looking at specific data, for example, in South Wales area this year, we've had 8 fire deaths, of which 6 of those 8 were 70 older, and all 8 were living on their own.
Wow.
So when you're asking about specific data about loneliness and targeted those, that's an area where we in the fire service are focusing our attention. Don't know if that helps.
Well, that's some very specific data there, isn't it, which you can add into your report. That's really useful. Anybody, any more comments while we're at it?
Can I come in, Chair?
Yes, please, Peter. I was waiting for you.
I was only going to say, when we're asking these questions, we're not trying to be critical of the PSB in any shape or form. I mean, the services, particularly Appendix 2, the list of what's going on, we know how valuable all those services are. We were just trying to tease out, if you like, the relationship between what's happening with the statutory partners and what the PSB is bringing to the table. And I think one of the themes that's come out of our range of questions today is, yes, we want a bit more evidence in the next report, and we'd like to see some outcomes that the PSB, if you like, are acting as a coordinator to generate. That's a sort of conclusion from me.
Well, he's just done the conclusion I was going to give you. It's about the evidence base. It's just going to it's just going to make your life easier. Now we've made those sort of observations. I think we're all making them, and you're getting that from a lot of us. Nothing like a bunch of chairs to make this sort of comments. I just say that because that's what you've got here, and no, I'm well aware of that. So, without much ado, we'll go on to the next part of this, which is the PSB annual. Yeah.
Chair, can I just say, I'm
Rose,
sure.
yeah, Rose, go on, please.
I'm sure there's loads of data out there, and I think one of the offshoots of the PSB, the community connectors, will have a lot of information there. I know they've done a couple of video clips and things, so it is there, but it's just actually proving, you know, what the benefits are to the community. So thank you very much.
Thank you. I just said you've got all of it. Anybody else? Wayne, do you want to say anything? And Richard?
I'm fine. I think you've covered it all aspects.
Thank you. Richard, do you want to say anything?
Yeah, I'm satisfied with the answers we received, Stuart.
Thank you. So no, we got a lot of richness out there. Obviously, it's a continuing feast, is what I was going to say on this one. It's not a feast at all. It's a very serious point. I have a light touch with it on that. But at the end of the day, it's ongoing, and there's a lot of stuff here. And I mean, you just started. I think that's a serious point. And Peter and Rose's observations on what you got there, and as Lyndon said, we know there's gaps there, but always was going to. I've always this image of this big. Lyndon's image said it's probably a big whiteboard, and you find out what's out there, and you get a feeling of what comes back. The fire service is good because I always get Steve Evans as our councillor that's on there on about this, and they're good at that, and that's a good place to start, I think. Thank you very much, anybody on this particular bit. And it's not an easy subject, I realise that. OK, questions now on the PSB annual report. Gwen, it's your turn now.
Would you like Sarah to introduce the report?
Oh, sorry, I should do it that way. Yes, please, Sarah, can you now introduce that report? So I'm just keen to get on this. I realise we've got time constraints. That's
of course. Thank you, Chair. I'll do a very brief introduction. Yeah. So it was just to highlight really that it's of course been a really difficult year with the pandemic, but a lot of progress has been made in each objective area. In September of last year, the PSB came together and had an interesting discussion about the objectives and whether or not they were still relevant during this new world that we're living in. And the feedback on that was they were very much still relevant, and if anything, even more important now. There's a wide range of achievements that have been made in the last year within the report. I won't go through each of them. The information is there. And I just had a note really to highlight to you all, and I picked it up in the previous item, that the data that's in the one appendix is lifted from Welsh Government. It's not it doesn't appear on a year-by-year basis. Therefore, you will see some, we've blocked them out in black. There are some gaps. What I didn't do, but I will do following today's meeting, is put a small note on there. So when that document is public facing, it explains why there's some gaps in the data.
Right. The other thing I would also do is get Adrian Huckin to introduce himself as well, please. I've seen him on there. You there, Adrian?
Yeah, I am still. Good morning, everyone. I was just interested earlier to, I got myself off mute because the last time I gave Mr. Puddy the £10 in the early 80s, I haven't seen it back. So I'll keep myself off mute now.
I used to work with Mr. Huckin years ago. That's how he knows me, in another context. So we do know each other. Okay, anyway, I'm sorry about being keen to get on. Thank you, Helen, for reminding me. Normally she elbows me, but she can't hear. So without much ado, we get on with this bit of scrutiny. I am recognising time constraints, and I don't really want to keep us here much before what time we should get off. Right, Gwyn, you can go with question 1, if you would, please.
Right, this is question to the PSB annual report, Stu.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Number 1, page 54, paragraph 4.3. What is the PSB's role in all these services?
Back to that.
I think that for me, again, this was picked up in our previous agenda item, in that it's very much about coordination and ensuring that we don't duplicate, and that partnership approach.
Right. Everybody happy with that? Is there anyone? Yeah. Okay. Brilliant. So after that is Richard Overton.
Chair. Sorry.
Yes. Rose.
I'm not aware whether I did ask the question yesterday, but I can't remember whether it's been put it. But we're coordinating these services, but are we actually identifying any gaps? I think that's the
yes,
issue.
I remember you saying that.
Can I take that question, Chair, please?
I think yes.
And it's a very pertinent question, Councillor Seaborn, because that's what's happening now. Because we are now at the beginning of the wellbeing plan process. We had to take a undertake a wellbeing assessment. This year now we are refreshing that, and we're refreshing that in the light of recent events as well. So we're hoping from well, not hoping, what will come out of that refresh of that wellbeing assessment is hopefully an identification of those gaps and a potential reprioritization of activity. So it's a very pertinent question, because we refresh every 3 years, because our objectives within the wellbeing plan are long-term objectives. They're not quick fixes in many ways. So it's a good point at this point. Good point in this point in time. I don't know whether that's actual proper English language, but I'm a Valley boy, so that's what we get. But in terms of the of the question, yeah, we're hoping the refresh will pick up the gaps, and if not, I'm sure when we come back to scrutiny in terms of what that wellbeing assessment looks like, members will certainly have a view on if we've missed anything out that they're aware of.
I'm going to ask a question. With regard to those gaps in provision, if you find they're serious enough, do you have the ability to actually plug them quickly if necessary? I'm not asking what they are.
No, but if we identified a significant gap outside of the planning process that will have been undertaken,
yeah,
that gap will then be taken back into the PSB for the PSB to make a decision on whether it wants to divert the priorities away from those that are published.
The only reason I ask is it's evident you as organisations during pandemic have been working very swiftly, and I'm wondering whether that's PSB or just working relationships, because it does seem complementary here that you've been working very well together. There must be some way in which those mechanisms, or is that just normal working practice?
Gwent is in a unique position, Councillor Ashley, to be honest, and I'm going to blow the trumpet of all the partners on the call here, because they are very involved in everything we do. We don't have the issues that other public service boards have. You know, we do have very much joined up approaches here, and we have good collaboration. and challenging conversations, as you'd expect us to be having. But certainly the want of the Torfaen PSB, and as I chair a regional group as well, knowing those other PSBs, we're very much focused and aligned. And if we need to change direction, we have a maturity to enable us to do that.
Because this particular issue, although it's loneliness and about individuals, some of them disappear off the radar. And that is what we're about with this particular discussion, is how we meet the needs of individuals. And it's something all agencies have to address. I know it, at its base level, it's about individuals and how you address their needs when it comes down to it.
Well,
that's always worrying.
There's a little bit of a combination with this, Councillor, because of course the population needs assessment takes account of individual need, whereas our wellbeing assessment looks at the need of the community. And sometimes you can only get a cigarette paper between the two, but they are both needs assessment. And that's why, why we work closely with Emma, why we work closely with Phil Diamond and other people that are known within the health and the RPB world, in order that we can better coordinate that. I'm also very much aware that as you all do as members, and as you know, we can't do it all. So we have to be focused on what those wellbeing objectives are. If there is a need to change, then that would need to go through a scrutiny process as well.
Right,
thank you. Plans are published.
Question number 2, if we're not going on with this one, is Richard Overton, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair. The reference is page 55, paragraph 4.4. What progress has been made in establishing a pooled fund for PSB activity?
Can I take that question, Chair? And I'm sure other colleagues will come in. Would that be okay?
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Just in terms of funding, I did mention to earlier members, we're not co-funded. We have to apply for funding that we get. But certainly, more recently, we have some great examples of partnership funding with the participatory budget process that's going on in being developed in the Blenavon area, and also Emma is taking a separate program to the south of the borough to work through that. So we often have these discussions at PSB, because all of our budgets are already earmarked, aren't they? Our council budgets are earmarked, budget health is earmarked, colleagues, our RSL, fire colleagues, probation colleagues. So in terms of pooling funding, they are topic specific to put a better rounded view on it in terms of what the PSB is looking to do. Then they will work together and fund that area. So we have had some success. Believe me, it would be a lot easier if we had co-funding, because then you could program your work, but we have to be realistic. We don't get co-funding from Welsh Government for PSB work, albeit we do lobby them frequently on it. And I think we've got officer support there, but it tends to get lost in the priorities end at the ministerial level. But some areas are making progress, as I mentioned, in terms of specifically participatory budget stuff that's going on.
Any more? Peter Jones? I can't hear you. You owe him money.
Lyndon, you mentioned Blenavon, and I can remember early on with the PSB, there was some resource to get somebody to do some mapping work. Is there any scope now that you've thought about in terms of, at a project level, doing more work together? I mean, in a minute, we're going to talk about NEETs, for example. I can see opportunities there where we'll come to that in a minute. But I'm just wondering, unless you actually put money in, it's very difficult to move things forward. So will you be looking for more opportunities other than it? I mean, we can go cap in hand to the Welsh Government for core funding, but okay, the budgets are earmarked by all the partners, but these are large budgets. So in the budget planning round, shouldn't you be thinking about top slicing very small amounts off each of the large budgets into some sort of PSB arrangement? Wouldn't that help?
That would help enormously. Councillor Jones is just getting every partner to agree to that, which is the correct conversation. But in terms of the work that all partners are putting into Blanavon, that is ongoing. So that project has always been something that we could wanting to deliver and prove it as a proof of concept piece of work that would then give confidence to the other partners to be thinking a little bit more wider on more collaborative partnership working. It's a hugely difficult arena. I always thought housing was a difficult arena, but it's nothing compared to partnerships. I have to be honest, and in terms of trying to get a range of partners to fund a specific issue, because we do have a different range of agendas as well. So, you know, I'm just trying to be frank and honest on this one, that we want the Blanavon project to work, because we want the Blanavon project to be a conduit for other elements that come through the partnership world. And we're also hoping that the work that Emma's doing down in the south of the borough will further give ammunition to that arsenal, shall we say. So
is that enough?
I mean, an example that just jumps into my head is I'm pretty sure all the partners will have equality plans.
Yeah.
Now, you've talked about the PSB having a coordination role. You know, why can't you all look at your equality plans, learn best practice, and, you know, that's just an example that's just popped into my head, but I'm sure you could all learn from each other. And at a national level, I mean, at the moment, the Welsh Government are a consultant on a race equality action plan, for example. So, you know, there could be opportunities there if you work together on equality, for example, that there may be opportunities to bid for money as a PSB, for example. You know, do you discuss these sort of things? And the Welsh Government recently published their new programme for government. Now, I would hope that, and I suspect you will, the PSB will be looking at that programme for government and deciding, right, is there any scope within that programme for government that we can use as a lever?
Yeah, absolutely, Councillor Jones. You know, that would be rather short-minded of us if we didn't look at that, wouldn't it? But in terms of the collaborative funding, we do bid on a Gwent-wise basis for that type of activity, and have been particularly successful on the larger ones that our colleagues in Fire and Rescue and colleagues in Neighbourhood Services have been involved with. You know, the Gwent Green Grid is one, Uplands project is another. So I was speaking specifically of the local partner agenda in terms of the funding that we want Blanavon to be proving is something that they want to invest in, because we are talking about investment here rather than an investment in the longer term rather than budgeting on the shorter term. We know from experience, don't we, every partner in the room, how difficult those conversations are, but they are happening. And I want to give confidence to you as chairs of all the scrutiny during as the PSB chairs, that those conversations are taking place. I saw Sarah may want to add something that I've no doubt missed out on.
Right.
I just thought that I would add that something like equality. I mean, equalities runs through, again, all of our objectives. Is sort of a string that threads all of them together. And aside from continuously working towards our objectives and updating each other on progress, we often bring things to our PSB meetings to information share. And one of those previous in the year was the socioeconomic duty. Now, not every partner has to sort of work to the duty. However, PSB partners are, you know, a key part in ensuring that they're fully up to date with duties like that. So we took it to our board meeting and we made sure that everybody was fully informed and aware of it. And I know that colleagues, for example, in housing have taken that forward, and they've had their own discussions in their organisations about it. So it's very much a a platform for us to information share as well as work towards those objectives.
Thanks for that, Sarah. Yeah, I mean, the equality agenda just popped into my head, but they're the sort of things you should be shouting about in the report.
Right, Rose, you want to come in?
Yeah, thanks. It's a comment really. There's a couple of people on these screens here that go back with me a few years. And 20 years ago, even council departments didn't talk to each other. The housing department would never talk to the social services department, etc., etc.
Smiling.
So, you know, to get the health authority on board, I was a member of the Torvine LHB, but I was actually one of the instigators of actually employing a joint officer in Sue Evans with Torvine LHB and social services. So we've come a long way, but we've still got a little bit of a journey to go as far as you know, actually committing our budgets to duplication is one thing. It was being duplicated all over the place, but now we've actually got a hold of that by the look of it. But you know, we do really need to start thinking about the priorities and looking at the funding issues coming together, I think. But don't knock yourselves up about, as I say, we never used to talk to each other years ago.
It's interesting I'm going to make one quick comment. It's always interesting when you get members on about budgets. It's a fun subject. Adrian, did you want to add anything? You were on and off.
No, I was just sorry. I was just going to pick up what Councillor Jones and Sarah was saying about the socio-economic duty, just to show collaboration. We adopted it in Melon straight away by amending our equality monitoring form, and it wasn't something we had to do statutory, but we did it. But the other thing I think as well is just about the budgets. It's in the report, I think, about a lot of work that all partners did on a regional employability model. No, we didn't actually get submitted to at the time because of the time frame involved with the Community Renewal Fund, but because that's a precursor really for funds to come from UK government, it's ready to roll, and we've done a lot of work on it. So it's just to mention, Chair Ruth Stewart, that that's something that could bring in extra funding into the PSB and the regional area across Gwent, actually, if and when it's successful. So it's things like that, perhaps, apart from looking at core funding, as you mentioned, top slicing, we just need to keep bidding again. So that was the point I was going to make. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So this is obviously a subject dear to everybody's heart. How do you get the money and resources to do the business? Right, everybody finished on this now? Thank you. Question number 3, I'll do this. How have the key challenges been mitigated? What is the outcome of the mapping process? But they're two together there. I think you combine those, didn't you, Ellen?
Yeah.
Chair, it was page 3.
Page 3, page 68, objective 1.
Objective
Sorry,
1 you're talking about.
it was one of yours, wasn't it?
I don't know.
Are you okay with that, Sarah?
Yep, sorry, so this question was in relation to objective 1, did you say?
Yes.
Yeah, could I invite one of my colleagues who looked after objective 1 to answer, please?
Who's responsible for that?
I could do it if you want to, Chair.
Oh, Andrew, hello.
Hi. So the first question relates to the challenges you mentioned. So the challenges, as identified in the report, is limited staff resources to develop and deliver on the agenda. And that's partly, I suppose, because we've got historical staff structures and priority in this area of green infrastructure, climate change and biodiversity loss, I think has moved quite a lot in the last couple of years. So I suppose the answer to the question in terms of that challenge is we continually work with colleagues in Welsh Government to seek resources to be able to deliver. And I think the fact that we've got the PSB approved green infrastructure strategy and the work we've done in the uplands just demonstrates the commitment there and the work that's been done. And we committed to continuing doing that. Then there's another one there, challenge in terms of cross-organisational working to deliver the strategy. This requires strong leadership from each party, each of the PSB partner organisations, and a commitment really to change cultures within organisations. And I suppose in terms of land management, we've got 3 key partners here that own a majority of land in Torfaen, which is ourselves as a council, Bronavon and Natural Resources Wales. And, you know, we are certainly highly committed to making the most of the opportunities to try and work much more collaboratively going forward. The Upland project is dependent on externally funded grant, and that is a risk going forward, and I think we'll need to work on that over the next few months. The last item there, challenge-wise, was the GIS resource. As Lyndon, I think, will be aware, you know, we've struggled, I think, with GIS resources in Torfaen to be able to deliver, even to deliver the mapping we've done to date. But we get in there. It's just, you know, as things are at the moment, you know, there isn't a lot of money around.
I'm going to get Peter Jones to bring question 4 in and then get some supplementary answers on both of those. Can you do that for me, Peter?
Yes, okay, thank you, Chair. Question 4 is on page 71, objective 2. There's no mention of the council's climate change declaration. Do all the agencies have their own climate change declarations? What will this impact on the PSB's work?
You see why I got those two together?
I'll pick that one up, Chair, if that's okay, and I'm sure Andrew will come in on the back of it, because Andrew's mentioned a number of projects here that's been funded through bids that the Gwent Strategic Wellbeing Action Group has submitted. So although the council has got a specific declaration, the council is one partner of the PSB. I'm not aware of the other organisations declaring a climate declaration, although I would imagine Natural Resources Wales are somewhere along the way there. But in terms of it being included within the wellbeing objectives now, and the proposal to move to, when we go to agenda item 3, climate change is very much in the core work programme of the local wellbeing plan going forward, and it will feature in the regional wellbeing plan going forward, because it's already part of the 6 overarching strategic objectives our group is working to now. So I think there's a natural synergy there. Even if they haven't declared a declaration, there's already a sign up across Gwent that climate change is a critical emergency for us all. Andrew, I don't know if you wish to add anything else to that.
Why I asked those two questions to be merged in one way, because if you haven't got the resources to do the mapping, as somebody who was responsible for the climate change, you can't map what your problems are. I think Andrew probably knows that one well. And it seems to be obviously resources being what they are, you need to be able to map that across the piece. Now, why we asked whether the organisations had their own climate change declarations was, are they riding on the back of what the councils are doing and the Welsh Government's doing, or do they declare their own declarations? We didn't know, to be honest.
I only know of the Torfaen declaration. I'm not certain, to be honest, Chair, what the others have declared. But what I am certain about, though, is that it's a Gwent priority as it is, as well as a Torfaen priority. So I was trying to give you some assurances that the climate change and it you know, it's going to affects everybody, doesn't it?
Affects everything, and I mean, I feel for Andrew in his operational role. He has to deal with this, but obviously fire service, housing providers, etc., all have the same problem. So it's business as usual, but it's also outside business as usual. So it becomes a real problem for everybody. I mean, after pandemic, it's the next big issue. It is the big issue. So that question was something, obviously, but we've just, as you well know, just done our climate change start. I wouldn't say it's it's not the answer to everything. So
and very similarly, in terms of the seriousness in which the local authority is taking this as a Torfaen specific, it sits within the Gwent work plan as well.
I
don't personally see that changing, because it's a major factor for us all. So I wanted to give you some assurances, Chair, that you know, that it certainly won't be dropping off the radar.
Right. Anybody else got any comments on this before we move on?
I'd just say, if I could say, Chair, it'd be interesting to see what comes out of the new wellbeing assessment now, in terms of how climate change might have a higher priority than it did when we did the first assessment 2 years ago.
Yes. Okay, next question, Rose. Question number 5.
Thank you, Chair. This is question 5 on page 78, objective 3. What role did the PSB undertake in delivering blended learning and setting up the hub provision for our key worker children?
Unfortunately, our representative for Objective 3 hasn't been able to attend. So if this is okay with you, I can take that question to her and ask for her to provide me with a response to send out to you. That would be all right.
Thank you.
Brilliant. Right, move on to the next one. Gwyn Jenkins.
Can I come in, Chair? Just on,
okay. Oh no, sorry, Peter. Sorry, I didn't see your hand up there.
Yeah, if I could just come in, and Sarah, I appreciate you might not be able to answer these questions, but in terms of education, just 1 or 2 little points I want to make. One is around, obviously, the next PSB annual report will cover, you know, the impact of COVID on education. I get complaints from parents now about, in primary school settings, for example, the children, you know, we're reading in the press that there's a deficit of learning, and yet they're not attending school full time. There's a lot of only 4.5-day weeks going on. Will the PSB and in their coordination role be looking at that? That's one question. Another question around education is the Welsh Government published the annual Learning Needs New Code of Practice in March. Now, within that code of practice now covers the age range from 0 to 25. Now, one of the big issues with additional learning needs is identifying preschool children, if you like, early years. Now, within the annual Learning Needs Code of Practice, there are now designated officers to be appointed in health bodies and in local authorities. That seems ripe territory for the PSB to be involved in and to report on. So can I just ask that that's considered going forward? Because I really think, particularly as the code, you know, the designated officers in the health bodies and the local authority being appointed, health boards have got a big role to play in identifying early needs. Paediatricians, health visitors going out, they can pick up particularly children with sensory loss very early. And I know it's going to be a burden, but the support needs to be provided preschool. So, Lyndon, going back to your coordination role, this is ripe territory for the PSB to get involved in, particularly as there is direct guidance coming out from the Welsh Government.
Any comments on that, or should we move on?
Councillor Johnson makes really good points to it, Ashley. I'll make sure that goes into today's notes, and I can pick it up separately with.
Yeah, and as a point of information, Chair, the Scrutiny Committee discussed the ALN bill at the last meeting a week ago.
Thank you.
About a fortnight ago.
So those notes suggested, are we all right on that, please, Helen?
Yes, I've got that.
Thank you very much indeed. No, you do good notes on these normally. Thank you. Brilliant. Right, next one is Gwyn Jenkins. The question 6, please.
Right. Page 82, objective 4. How will the move to a regional PSB impact on the stability and ultimate success of the place-based pilot in Blaenavon?
I'll take that one, Chair, if that's okay. It shouldn't have any impact at all, Councillor Jenkins, because the proposal of moving to a regional PSB won't happen until 2023. So work will continue as is.
Emma?
Yeah, just for reassurance as well, there are other structures such as the Torfaen Integrated Partnership, which has a role in the governance and oversight of integrated wellbeing networks, and the Blaenavon place-based collaboration is very much part of that. So as I raised at the last PSB meeting, I was looking for a strategic group that sort of sits below the PSB to support to drive forward this development, regardless of the issue of the Gwent PSB. We need a bit more focus on it, and Torfaen Integrated Partnership is likely to be that body.
Thank you there. Right. Any more supplements on that? No, thank you. Richard Overton, question number 7, please. You've got 2 there, Richard.
Yes, Chair. Can you provide some examples of redesigned services resulting in closer relationships with communities, outlining the benefit to those communities? And the second question, how advanced is the retrofit programme? What percentage of homes have been completed?
And it's number 7 page.
Oh, sorry, I did give the reference.
Yeah, put the references in, Richard, please.
Yes, page 89, objective 5.
Do you want to pick a couple of points up, sir? That'd be
yes,
easy.
please, Adrian. That'd be lovely. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Overton. If I could just sort of focus on the retrofit first, there's quite a bit of activity going on locally at the moment, and with some government funding coming from an optimised retrofit programme. So both ourselves locally and Blaenavon are involved with that. So, for example, in Mellon's case, we're already working on 90 odd of our properties, and it's an initial pilot. But there's a lot more monies to come as far as the decarbonisation agenda. So it's very much early days, I suppose, Councillor, at the moment in terms of being able to evaluate that. And a small percentage of our stock. So in Mellon's case, it's 90 odd properties of 3,000 properties in terms of the stock. But it's a start, and it's a welcome start in terms of the decarbonisation agenda, and linking into what you were talking about earlier, which is climate change, because a lot of the associations in particular have set decarbonisation targets and whole organisation targets to be carbon neutral by certain dates. And we're working on ours in Mellon to go to board in September. So specifically, there's quite a bit of work in that area, really, and there's a lot of sort of facts and figures we'll probably be able to update as we move forward. Your first question really was, sorry, if you could just repeat that again for me, Councillor Overton.
Yes. Can you provide some examples of redesigned services resulting in closer relationships with communities?
Yes.
Outlining the benefits to those communities.
Yeah, we're involved at a housing association level on a local basis at redesign those sort of community engagement services and trying to work in a more coordinated way. So, for example, obviously we're working very closely with Blaenavon locally on that in the way that we provide those services. Obviously, taking heed of what's happening in Blaenavon, I think I was referred to the pilot project up there as well in terms of the participatory budgeting, because there should be a different way, and probably will be a different way, that we provide those services. Because at the moment, as you probably understand, that we're all providing services to the community. I wouldn't say in an ad hoc way, but we've all got a lot of resource going into areas in Torfaen, and we can do that in a far better coordinated way. So we're working with colleagues on that at the moment, and primarily we're looking at our direct sort of housing management services on that, how we provide those to the community. So that's a live example at the moment, one that we can working on, and I think one that we'll be able to report progress on, at a future meeting.
Thank you very much.
I'm going to ask supplementary there, because you were all aware, and I'm sure Emma was because she worked on it. The Communities First programme demised, 3-4 years ago. Are you filling in the gaps from that programme as housing providers? I know the borough's doing some work on it. Are you all working in partnership in your local communities? Because in a way, that question there is asking that question to some extent. And what's come after Communities First? Because part of Communities First is what you guys are doing now, and part of it's been met by the borough, and PSB is sort of about being asked to look at what comes next after Communities First, really.
Yeah, it's a good point, Stuart, and you know, obviously going back a long way. I mean, a lot of this is taking us back to traditional community development work that we used to do in the 70s and 80s in a sense as well. But yeah, I mean, at the moment, it's just to reassure people that we are trying to look at it in a coordinated way, the way we deal with community development engagement, working with all agencies, not just housing agencies, in a locality way. I'm not sure what will come eventually out of that, because we're kind of working through that. And of course, we did a couple of years ago, as part of the wellbeing assessment, we did a mapping exercise as well to understand really who was providing what. And there's still a lot of that we need to do. But there is a gap, and there's some references made in the PSB report as well to some areas of challenge and funding gaps. So I'm sure this is going to be one that we continue to talk about, let's put it that way, as we move forward.
Without being disingenuous, is this a bit of the PSB reinventing the wheel, or is it new work?
No, I think it's additionality. I mean, you know, there is obviously gaps. There are gaps in provision, and obviously Communities First, you know, when the programme was being funded, was filling a very important role there. So there's definitely, I think, gaps in provision. The additionality, I think, is what Linda was referring to earlier, which is trying to coordinate activity here across the board. So I do believe there's some additionality and some specifics that will come out of this. But, you know, it's a work in progress at the moment, Stuart, really.
Thank you. And I'm really, really pleased to hear you're doing retrofitting, because I remember walking around 10 years ago with one of my community council colleagues saying, gosh, we couldn't have to do with some more insulation and panels, solar panels and all the rest of it. And actually somebody's finally grasped the metal. And 2 weeks ago, when we did the global climate change thing, looking at that on our global climate change thing, households is 1/3 of the problem.
Yes, it is. It's substantial. And you know, if the UK is going to meet its global targets, that will probably be reset in the autumn, housing's got a big role to play. I mean, the other exciting thing is we're looking at some new products and services at the moment, and what we're trying to do is link into Objective 6 and look at a manufacturing base of some of these projects in Torfaen. Really? We can bring companies to Torfaen, and we're talking about technology, you know, nanotechnology, graphene technology with heating systems. So it's all state-of-the-art stuff, but it's moving so quick, you know. So it's some good things to come, but you know, we are on the journey. That's the important thing.
The other one that was interesting in that was the low-tech modern stuff like Wood Creek and all that stuff. Have you looked at that stuff as well?
Yeah. Again, you know, I think the products and services and the technologies, it doesn't have to be, as you're referring to, sort of high tech at the high level. There's a lot of low tech stuff we're looking at in terms of installation as well. What we've got to be careful of, what the retrofit program that going into much detail is doing, it's looking at elements of the components and what will work and what won't work, so that we don't scale it up until we know, you know, how cost effective some of these things are. But like I said, it's in early days at the moment. It's a Welsh Government funded project, and it will be evaluated properly as well.
Thank you very much indeed for that. Right, question number 8, page 95, Objective 6. What has been done to migrate the finding risk around the NEETS programme? Could you include a section outlining the aspiration and impact of actions on each objective? Are you okay with that? Sarah, I presume.
Objective 6, Adrian, are you happy to answer that part, please?
Yeah. I can certainly pick up the first bit of it, really. I mean, because we flagged up in the challenges, Chair, that the employability and NEETS programs are likely to still run till December 2020. So there's a few months, not much, but a few months to go there, and that's sort of circa £2 million. So we have flagged up as a challenge that there's a funding risk in there, as well as we flagged up the apprenticeship programme changes that have been made. And at the end of this month, in July, there's some significant changes there. So our apprenticeship providers are changing over the next 5 years, and probably some of you know who the new providers are, you know, but there's some impacts in that, really. I just go back to in terms of the gap, in terms of perhaps how we're dealing with it. Working with very much the council and Dave Leach in particular, actually, Dave and other partners across the PSB. There's a draft employability and skills strategy that's out at the moment. I think that might be coming to your cabinet probably in the autumn. I don't know, Linda will probably know the time more. But in that, there's some clear objectives and recommendations, really, the draft I've seen anyway. And it links into an earlier answer I was talking about, really, about how we fund and support that employability strategy and the work we'd be doing under the regional about a new model, a new employability model. So what I was going to suggest there really is that work we've done for the Community Renewal Fund, the CRF fund, which was never submitted, that work puts a business case and a funding package together to be able to apply for probably the new UK Prosperity Fund that's going to come out, or anything that might come out locally. So that's the work we've done in preparation for the funding gap on the NEETs programme, but it does link into some other key changes on apprenticeships as well. And the second bit, sorry, again, Stu, the second bit of the question.
Could you include a section outlining the aspirations and impact of actions for each objective?
For each of, sorry, sir.
Oh, sorry. Can I just clarify? Do you mean each objective, as in each of the well-being objectives as a whole?
I think that's what's looking at Helen's face. That's what it's intended.
Okay, so you'd like to see a table with each objective and the main.
Yes, yeah, we
okay.
felt that there were a couple of columns missing. They all tend to be on there.
Okay.
It's a comment, I think, more than anything.
No problem. Thank you.
I've got, and have you finished on that, Adrian?
Yeah. Sorry, finished on the NEETs one. Thank you.
Yeah, is that Andrew Osborne wants to come in?
It's just in relation to this item, as an example, a practical example through Objective 1. We brought in 5 trainees within Streetsea in the current financial year, and through the Gwent Green Grid programme, we've got funding for 4 access trainees to work across Gwent, led by Torvine, now over the next 2 years. So just some practical examples of how this can work across the other objectives.
What are they doing, as a matter of interest?
Well, the street scene trainees are doing the usual street scene activities like grass trimming and litter picking, that kind of thing. And the trainees we're talking about for Gwent Green Grid will be doing cutting back the rights of way and style making and finger posts, that kind of thing.
A good practical project. Peter, you wanted to come in?
Yes, thank you, Chair. If I can just
paying you in money.
No. If I can just return to the NEETs agenda a minute. I've got to be a little careful here because I understand that NEETs was discussed by the Prosperous Scrutiny Committee last week.
Right.
I haven't seen the outcome of that, so I'm talking just off the top of my head. But I really think the NEETs agenda is really important for the PSB to look at. Unfortunately, children that are NEETs, particularly 14 to 17-year-olds, get heavily involved in the criminal justice system, which means fire service get involved with things like grass fires, health service gets involved with things like substance misuse, police, housing get involved with antisocial behaviour, obviously education get involved. I'm pleased that what Adrian was saying, that the PSB they need to keep an eye on this ball in terms of NEETs. It's really important. So that's just a comment I'd make on that. And in terms of apprenticeship programmes, if we can just quickly return to the new Welsh Government programme for government, which they published in the last few weeks. They're widening the scope of the apprenticeship scheme now, and it's going to include social care. So that needs to be factored into future thinking. Thank you.
I will make one comment. I was on the Prosperous, which and that was an important factor. It did get brought up, and it's important that we recognise that those sorts of schemes are there. Andrew, you want to come back in again?
Sorry, Chair, I need to put that hand down.
You do, don't you? Anybody else want to come back on this? Because it's
Stuart, just to pick up Councillor Jones's point on the apprenticeships, just to reassure him, we're looking at apprenticeship scheme, working with Dave Leach and other colleagues, across Torvine, across all apprenticeships, not just in construction terms.
Yeah.
And we're looking at a model at the moment in a business case. So I think we're trying to work through that. So I'm just saying, in hopefully not the too near future, we might be able to bring something back in a practical way. And that will be looking at apprenticeships in sectorial, cross sectors, not just in construction, which is the one that we've got working in Torvine to apprentice at the moment, really. So just
I would like to add something else. There's a lot of children, a lot of young people who not necessarily who would in the past have gone to university, probably fairly highly qualified, who choosing for one reason or not. I've noticed this in various publications, are not choosing to go to university and want to go to work. So the possibility of them having an apprentice, you probably picked that up already in your sector. They are choosing not to go to university because of the expense. I've had that in my own family, funnily enough, because they go there and then discover it's horrendous. Now that needs make sure that you've got higher and lower level apprenticeships, skill levels. I just wonder what your comment would be on that.
Yeah, no, we're finding that at the moment. There's the economics of it, and you're quite right, Stuart. A lot of people who would have probably gone in the past are not going because of the affordability issues. So we are looking at that in terms of the widest possible apprenticeship program we can put together, involving all skill sets and levels, really. So it's a new trend, I'm afraid. It's because of it was happening pre-COVID as well. This was, but it's certainly at the moment the case of people can't afford to go, or are making choices that they don't want to be left with a debt, is the bottom line, and they come out of university. Yeah.
That's what, Rose?
Yeah. Can I just ask how this apprenticeship scheme is, or any apprenticeship scheme, is being communicated across to young people?
Yeah, I mean, that's one thing we've picked up, because when we did the mapping exercise, Councillor Seaborn, there's a number of apprenticeship schemes happening across, that partners of the PSB are happening across Torvine. And how do young people know about them? How do they get access to them? Very confusing, mixed picture. So what we're doing with this particular business case proposal is to try and coordinate and have one scheme branded up and hopefully badged up in the Torvine area, where all partners will be involved, and then having a particular conduit so people are able to, know where to go, know who to contact and who to access. The biggest issue at the moment is what we're working on is how will the funding work. So if we can crack that one, then we think we've got the rest of the scheme sort of mapped out at the moment anyway. But it is a problem. It's very confusing at the moment for people. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you.
Peter Jones, you are muted now.
Just Adrian, just an observation. I think that Welsh Government are going to loosen the strings slightly on the apprenticeship levy, which might help. So I'd keep an eye on that going forward.
Yeah, that would be helpful. We've been asking that for a little while. So thanks very much for that information. Thank you.
Right. Appendix, if no more questions, Appendix 3, Peter Jones, you can go on this one. That's question number 9.
I'm having trouble now with this muted button. We're looking at page 107, page 107, Appendix 3. And we're back to the evidence approach again.
Yeah, I think we've kind of covered these.
Yeah, I think
last report.
Chair, I do think we're asking a lot of questions here about evidence, which I do think possibly we've already dealt with.
Yeah, Helen, what do you want to take out?
I just think the 3 questions there have been answered. The last question was a question that you brought up overall. Was about the PSB's assessment of their overall performance. I think that one's still relevant.
Yeah.
All right. So number 10, Peter. Number 10.
Do you want me to ask that then, Chair?
Yes, please.
Yeah. There were a number of questions on evidence, which we've well covered, as Helen is absolutely right. So
do number 10.
Yeah. The question 10 is, what is the PSB's assessment of overall performance, positive or negative, based on the indicators presented?
Could I just pick that one up there, and I'm sure Sarah will come in on the back of it. Of course, we've had a number of PSB meetings that, of course, we had to cancel early on in the year. But that doesn't mean that work hasn't gone on in the background, as the report clearly indicates to you as scrutiny members today. We from today we'll be taking scrutiny recommendations and then feeding that into the report that will go to the PSB now in July, because of course this is the pre-scrutiny before it goes to the main board. How the board will assess whether things have been progressed positively or negatively, we'll know when that's presented to the board. From a personal perspective, and I hope the chair wouldn't mind, but I'd just like to express my thanks to Sarah and the rest of the partners, as my attention has been on other projects during the year, and Sarah's been working with partners to really drive this through. Having read the report, I think it's positive, and I think it's positive because they haven't sat back on their haunches and just waited for things to come to them. They have been progressing, but ultimately that decision, Councillor Jones, will be made by the PSB when it's presented in July, if that's helpful.
You're right with that, Peter? Right. Not any more supplements. We'll now go on to 3 questions on the regional PSB. Are you introducing that again, Sarah?
No, that's mine, Councillor Ashley.
That's yours. Oh, good.
It's mine. Yeah, I was going to suggest, Councillor Ashley, as it's coming near to the end of the meeting, as my colleagues and other partners, there's no real need for them to be here for this particular subject area. I wondered if you wouldn't mind giving them the opportunity, if they should wish to leave at this point, they can do so.
They can do, or they can sit and listen if they want. It's up to them. You're more than welcome to go if you want.
I'm sorry, Chair, I'm going to have to shoot off. I love to listen to Lyndon most of the time. I'm sure I can pick it up. So, but thank you very much for the invitation anyway today.
Nice to see you again, Adrian.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks all. I'll leave as well. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Bye-bye. Thank you very much.
That's 35 years of working alongside Adrian Huckin. It's surprising we're still talking, to be frank.
I first met him in Newport in '94, so yes.
Yes, well, 1983 was my first involvement with him, so I'm going back a little bit old. Members, I just thought it'd be helpful if I just put this into some form of context for you first. Report before you today is really around the developing of a regional PSB, which I know a number of colleagues on the call is aware that there's been discussion over many years. The paper you've got is a collaborative paper that's been written by all the partnership leads across Gwent. So it's not only been written by myself, but other PSB leads right across the piece, as it should be, because it's discussing a regional approach. So in terms of just giving a little bit of a potted history, Public Service Board, as you'll be aware, is a partnership board. Primary duty is to improve social, economic, environmental and cultural well-being, and the well-being of future generations sets up that collective duty for us all. And you've already commented and given some excellent points, and I'm not just saying that because we're in a meeting. I think some of the discussion we've had this one is going to be really helpful for us going forward, and also helpful for us on the regional footprint. We are one member as a council of the statutory other 3 members of the Public Service Board, and as you'd be aware through looking through the report itself, it covers quite a large range of partners, of which the council is one of the statute members. We've currently got across the whole of Gwent 5 extremely similar structures in terms of how we operate. So there's 5 public service boards across Gwent. They're all chaired by the leader of the council, who's overseeing the public service boards. And in addition to this, we also have a group called G10, Now, G10, for members who don't know who they are, that is the group of the most senior executives and leaders, chairs of boards across the PSB partnership, and have been meeting for quite some time. So, for example, for Torfaen, member of G10 is the leader and the chief executive, and if they can't make the meeting, then the leader appoints a representative as the chief executive. So in addition to that, we have the Chief Constable for Gwent, the Police Crime Commissioner. We have the head of the Probation Service, the Chief Executive of the Police Commissioner's Office, along with other very senior heads of the Health Board. So we have the Chief Executive and the Chair of the Health Board. So there's a number of those senior people on G10 that actually duplicate across into the PSB arena. And for a number of years, they've been concerned about the wider ability to pull a more regional strategic approach, whereas 5 bodies are currently working into a strategic single body, but being very clear on the absolute need. And this is my biggest want of everything, is that the local partnership arrangements stay in place, so it doesn't get lost into the regional arena, but local partnerships stay very much a focus on that. So I chair what's called the Gwent Strategic Wellbeing Assessment Group, and I've chaired it for 6 years, and it's the group that oversees the wider partnership arrangement activity that I mentioned to you earlier, so such as stuff as climate change and other elements, as those chief executives have already, and leaders have already alluded to the fact that we work better together than we do singly. And that is something that does happen very well across the Gwent footprint. When this does merge, it will be the largest public service board merger in Wales. And it's something that all of the public service boards have agreed that they want to do. And we are one partner of that. And as part of that process, the public service boards and G10 have wanted this proposal to be going through our governance structures, which is here yourselves as scrutiny, and a subsequent report to council on the proposal to move to a joint PSB. It's not in the gift of any one of the single partners to agree or disagree. It's been a conclusive discussion at the PSBs across Gwent, and all 5 have agreed to take that way forward. What does really matter for us going forward is how does structures, scrutiny, business, performance being then structured from the regional, but also have that local flavour. So you will have seen from the report, and we commenced this work in January, and the reason why it hasn't been due before members is simply because I didn't have enough detail to bring to you for you to be able to have a view on, or even a view on what's happening, because you'd have more questions to me than I would have answers, and rightly so. So we're all taking this similar report, slight differences because we have different structures, of course, but in terms of the direction of travel, what's very absolute and key, as I've said, is the maintenance of the local partnership arrangements, and that will be worked through, but it's an absolute prerequisite that they remain in place. There's no change until 2023, and our existing wellbeing plan continues, and you will continue to be scrutiny of the PSB up to 2023. We, as the interim, has been working with our scrutiny officers in terms of looking at how regional scrutiny will work, and we will be bringing regional scrutiny back into this arena for you to have a view on as the appropriate body within our council to be looking at those scrutiny arrangements going forward, in order that it meets the requirements and suggestions you have. Then we take back into the regional arena for going forward. There will be a regional scrutiny set up, so as following on from that, members will be aware of the absolute need to have that in place, because otherwise we won't be able to have an appropriate oversight. So in essence, members, it's still very much business as usual for us as a local PSB going forward. I'm very well, I'm leading part of the discussion and implementation around the governance group, taking things forward to make sure that we have the right structures in place. We have officers then working on the regional wellbeing assessment, which will take account of local need as well, because we're absolutely certain that members will say, well, Newport is different to Torvine and Torvine is different to Newport, so we absolutely need that local input as well, and that assessment will also come back to scrutiny for review as well, in order that you're not only cited, but you have an opportunity to input as well as that progresses. In terms of funding, there's no funding with this. There's no budget or other requirements to have oversight from that way. As I mentioned to you earlier, we're pretty much a bed, borrow and steal set up at the moment. So unlike CCJs and other elements, there's no budgetary elements to this. Why do we think it's a good idea? It gives us a real focus of what's important regionally in terms of tackling big ticket items. And I would say one of those big ticket items is climate change. So we work better, I think, as a group of 5. What will feed into that will be local action and regional action. And as chair of the regional group, we will continue to seek funding. And we've been relatively successful for that because Welsh Government see Gwent is working well, which is always helpful in that arena. So happy to take questions, members, but I just wanted to give you a little bit of flavour and background. It's an unusual paper coming to you because we're not asking you to scrutinise anything, but it's an opportunity through our existing governance structure to make sure members are informed, to take on any views, but an opportunity for me just to present to you as one of the co-authors of this paper and one of the leads in the development where this arrangement is currently going, and our intention to ensure that scrutiny is at the heart of things that we have going forward. Thank you, Chair. Talked a lot.
Right, I've got one question. You want us as a scrutiny activity here, I've noticed, to note the recommendations. I can put that to before that. We've actually got 3 questions, and I've got another question of my own. Shall I just ask Lyndon the questions, because I think it's going to be quicker if I do that, and then I've got another question. I pray the committee doesn't mind that one. But number 1 question, these specific questions that we did at pre-scrutiny, I'm sure you will dispatch these with your usual effortlessness. Number 1, they are specific because they did come out of our members' reading of the paper. Number 1, will a move to a larger regional footprint mean that these organisations will become more remote from the communities they serve? I believe you did answer that, but it's worth hearing what you said.
No, absolutely not. I mean, in fairness, the leader, the Alison before she left, and I'm sure Stephen, when he comes in, will have the same view.
Yeah.
The absolute locality elements of partnership working will not go away, and I've been very clear with my fellow partnership leads across Gwent that this will only work if members have confidence that we have an eye on the local and what matters to local communities in each of our 5 different areas that will feed into our local and regional priorities going forward. So for me, is an absolute prerequisite that the existing partnership that we have, the officer support group that we have in Torvine, stays in place. There was early discussions that some people thought that if we move to a regional approach, we won't have to attend as many meetings. That's simply not the way this should be done. How I view this is the Gwent Public Service Board should be setting a strategic direction for priorities across the region that fit into the well-being of future generations and are picked up from our well-being assessments. because otherwise we don't get a golden thread through to what we do locally. So in my view, although the regional PSB members, they may not have to attend as many meetings, I'm absolutely adamant that those members of the Operation Officer Support Group continue to attend as they do now, our meetings on a 6-weekly basis. So the correlation between local and regional is not diluted in any way, and no one member has a specific influence over the work of the regional PSB. So everyone has local accountability as well.
Any questions? Sorry, Lynn. Any questions on that at all, or are you happy with that answer?
Yes, Chair. I was one of the main contributors prior to me becoming a scrutiny chair, who voiced my opinion about not knowing anything that the PSB was doing as a backbench member.
Yeah.
And I just wondered, and I'm in my new position as chair of education, and this is my first meeting of the PSB, how I can report back to my scrutiny committee. And I wondered whether or not there perhaps should be a way of passing things up and down the line. I know we've had a couple of updates in full council on member seminars, but really before today I didn't have a clue what the PSB was actually doing, because nobody reported back apart from those member seminars. So going regional looks as if it might even be more difficult for members to understand what's going on a regional issue. So I just wondered whether you might want to look at how whether it's us as chairs attending this PSB report back, or how we report back to our backbench members that haven't got a clue what's going on.
Reporting mechanism, Buzz, is what you're saying. Yeah.
I mean, Councillor Seaborn's made a very sensible, and because we once the Public Service Board was established and all of the statutory members agreed that they become a body in their own right. So the annual reporting, although scrutiny has to take place through the local authority systems, and that will continue to happen on a regional basis as well. I would expect at that point with co-opted members from the other partners as well, because they want to be reporting back as well. My understanding is, Councillor Seaborn, it would be in a going forward, and in a similar way this is that members who attend this meeting report back into the relevant organisations or the relevant people they go to. There is no requirement for whole council reporting. There is no requirement for other partner reporting other than through the scrutiny arrangements. Council may take a different view, may want other things to happen. Should that be the case, I can look at things locally in that way. The absolute welcoming of everybody's view on scrutiny, I think it's something that we've heavily beat the drum on to give. I hope you, some members on this call, the absolute need for some clear oversight on this and reporting back through.
Peter, you had a question?
Oh, okay.
Okay, all right. Question number 2, which is more specific. Will the move to a regional PSB impact on the stability and ultimate success of the place-based pilot in Blaenavon? No. And any other like that, I suspect. Yeah, well, I think you're already given assurance on that already, haven't you?
There's absolutely no change to the existing arrangements that we've got in place. So you will have an opportunity to scrutinise what's going on in Blaenavon.
Okay. And the one I brought up, which is, in some ways is not relevant, I don't know if it's relevant or not, but I did raise it. How do the regional areas relate to bodies like Public Health Wales in terms of activities delivered? It's a separate health authority, isn't it?
No, it's part of, well, it covers the whole of Wales, but yeah. When this moves to a Gwent footprint, we'll be wholly in the ABUHB area.
Yeah.
Which other PSBs haven't got the luxury of having that, because they span different county boroughs, different health boards, sorry. So in Gwent, the Gwent PSB will be coterminous with the policing footprint and also the health footprint. So for us, it's an ideal fit because health and police fit within the Gwent region, although Gwent doesn't really exist, does it? But I mean, it's commonly called Gwent.
Who's on there now? Rose.
Yeah, just a point of information. We've got the Public Health Wales, which is the whole Wales, and we've also got the South Wales Fire Authority and the so you know we do overlap some of the region of Gwent, and I'm just wondering whether or not that should perhaps come back to the local and then be fed into the region, or is the regional Public Service Board going to have some input into, you know, South Wales or the whole of Wales?
I was going to add in also the whole problem about areas and you use the word coterminous. It's an old problem. How you sit one thing with another. Gwent Police is another one. Areas of where everything sits has always been a problem, hasn't it?
It has, but there doesn't seem to be an issue with this because the South Wales Fire and Rescue Service have welcomed it, and want to do it as Public Health Wales. So in terms of the partners that are likely to sit on the PSB, if you imagine South Wales attend 18 PSBs at executive level, they're still going to have to attend 18 PSBs local level. But at that strategic executive level, instead of the chief fire officer attending 5 PSBs in Gwent, he's only going to attend 1. As our well-being plans are reasonably well aligned as well, we've all got similar priorities, and we will likely have similar priorities as we do the well-being assessment, because we'll all have the same issues coming out of COVID, and we'll all have the same issues. We'll all have the same issues around recovery. We'll all have the same issues around education. How we get education back up to where it was, because children have lost 18 months of teaching basically, and it's no surprise that, you know, we're having some difficulties in schools. You know, this is going to take generations to recover from, members. To be honest, is there a quick fix on anything? There'll probably be some quick wins, quick fixes. No, we're in this for the longer term.
Right. The one other quick one
than we would locally.
Sorry, I should put my headphones on. The other quick one, which I think you might have answered a bit, was about climate change. You said about one of the major pieces of work of this body is going to be that. In terms of declarations, how are you going to agree amongst all those authorities? They might have different ways of looking at climate change emergency, because I can see that that's going to be a very interesting debate. So I use the word interesting in inverted commas. Different approaches, different ways of dealing with things. How will you resolve that? Is the regional PSB itself going to have a climate change a declaration of its own, or a policy of its own? How are you going to work that one? I'm intrigued, to be honest.
Yeah, it's a good question, Councillor Ashley. You know, we were given an extremely tight time scale to get us to a September launch, and I've spent some considerable time on this along with other colleagues to sort of get us into an idea of what it could look like. The PSB are going to have to determine what their priority work programme is going forward once the revised wellbeing assessment, which takes account of local and regional, comes forward. At the moment, we've all got climate change on our wellbeing plans. Every single authority in Gwent's got it. Every single authority in Gwent has got the economy. We've all got welfare on it. So there are a lot of already aligned areas that are going to be taken forward. The one thing that I have suggested to the board, and this is just me talking to you now as members, that rather than 5 authorities concentrate on climate change, then one authority takes the lead for that, but has the connectivity into the other 4. So as you don't have 5 senior executives tied up into a climate leadership battle, whereas you give one of the authorities leadership on taking it forward, but have that accountability back through into individual organisations, scrutiny arrangements on what progress is happening. So it's a way of
the only danger with this is you might, for want of a better expression, take an all-encompassing view or a back shelf view. There are different, if you look at the 22 authorities in Wales, there are some that have got what I would say a very lukewarm approach to it, and some that have got an all-encompassing view. I'm not saying which they are. I think Torvine's somewhat in the middle on this. We actually don't do too badly, but some authorities are not as good as they could be. I'm saying that from an environmentalist point of view. The problem is that if you set in the middle, you're going to get a camel. This is a problem with the camel approach, you know, which is a horse designed by a committee. This is the problem, and it's not an issue you can do that with, is it?
Well, I would hope, because the proposed membership that you've seen in the terms of reference there, and the way in which we're looking to move it through.
Yeah.
They are the most senior leaders that we have in Gwent.
And we've got you as well. So no, I think that's a reasonable proposition.
It's you know, those people sat at that top strategic table have a responsibility of coming back to you as members as well, because obviously the lead, I'm assuming, feeds back on these issues and to different groupings, Councillor Overton. I don't know how you operate politically outside of council, but in terms of having that body there to keep people focused, and we have to bear in mind this is going to be the largest PSB in Wales. It's going to draw a lot of attention from Welsh government, so they're going to want to be, because this fits in with their policy for simplifying partnerships, albeit the partnership arena is massively complicated. You know, we are going to be closely scrutinised on how this works. So the collaboration, the agreement around priorities, the absolute inclusion of local need and bringing that in is going to be the only way it's going to work. As will the only way this will work effectively is that if we maintain strategic oversight at the regional level, good quality scrutiny at the regional level, we maintain our local planning arrangements, and if necessary, scrutiny wants to call in via another scrutiny once it transfers across. Anything that they're concerned of, that would also be on the table as well. So it's just ensuring that we have those operational structures and accountability and opportunity for members to be involved.
Of course, those senior people will be budget holders as well, which may help.
Well done, Rose. No, Rose has got there. Any other comments before I go to the noting part of the agenda?
Well, that absolutely didn't cross my mind at all, Councillor Seymour.
He doesn't say these things, but he gets there, doesn't he? And you notice how excited members, even on scrutiny, get about budgets.
It's the bugbear of the PSB. It's very difficult to manage things without having some sign up and I wasn't joking earlier. No, it is. I'm from a housing background, and some of the stuff in partnerships, it frustrates me beyond belief. But,
right, members, any more questions before we go on to the recommendation? No, your silence means you want to move on with this. So somebody propose the recommendation and second it, please.
I move the recommendation.
I second it.
Thank you, and everybody in agreement. Hands up. I can see you all here. This is good for once. Thank you. Everybody's in agreement. So you got your recommendation there, Lyndon. You happy with that?
Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much for a very succinct explanation about that. I think we now know what it's about. Look forward to hearing and the scrutiny arrangements. I'm sure we will be informed in future dates what that's all about. Thank you very much indeed for that. That as usual, you put it in a very succinct manner. Thank you very much indeed. We can now go on and formulate our scrutiny recommendations for the whole of this.
Thanks, Lyndon. I was a boy.
Oh, fantastic. Congratulations.
Cheers.
Take care all. Bye-bye.
Cheers. Thank you very much indeed.
Bye, Lyndon.
Bye. Okay, Helen, where are we? I think we start with what you've gleaned there and then any burning issues that anybody's got. So
we'll
shall I go
start with
through?
loneliness. Start with the loneliness report first.
Yes.
So in your discussions, I think you brought out that there's some slight misalignment with the plans for the RPB and the PSB plans. So would one of your recommendations be for those to be more closely aligned going forward?
Is that everybody in agreement with that as an idea? Brilliant.
Yes.
Next one, Helen.
Considering pandemic, we've talked a lot about the pandemic and that the full sort of effects of that hasn't been known yet. So considering that, should they consider the results of the pandemic as being a theme of its own? I think you were alluding to that in your discussions.
Yes.
Yeah, I think Lyndon capped it as well. As it'll be a generation thing, won't it? It'll just need to be kept on the agenda.
Okay.
Right, that's great. Any other burners? Peter, you had a fair amount to say. There are several themes.
I've got a couple, Chair.
Go on, so Rose, you go first, and then Peter can formulate your thing.
I think throughout all of it, the core funding is an issue, so we might need a recommendation around for the PSB to look at partnership funding.
You liked the word budget, didn't you? You got in there straight away.
Yeah, I think the gaps thing need to be picked up once they've looked at the report again and highlighted the gaps. The other one was the apprenticeship signposting. I think that should be signposted on the partnership apprenticeship.
Are we still on loneliness?
No, well, I think it goes through all of it, doesn't it? The loneliness, the signposting bit. Sorry, the signposting bit about where people can get their help.
Can we keep on loneliness at the moment, please? Because that would otherwise to make a scrutiny.
Yeah, it's about picking up the gaps and like I highlighted with the young mums and things. You
That's
know.
good, Rose.
And the other one was the whole scrutiny feedback. I'm going to have to go, I think, so I'm just picking up the bits that I've highlighted. So core funding, the apprenticeship, signposting, and scrutiny feedbacks with the gaps. So that's me on all the reports.
Rose, thank you very much for your contribution. Brilliant. That's lovely. And budgets, yes, I remember that for this meeting. Right, Peter. You're going to pay more money to Lyndon by the sound of it.
I haven't got anything to add to it. I mean, the funding was the key one.
I think. As we were discussing, I think a thematic thing throughout the reports was it was difficult to ascertain from the reports what the PSB were adding to the or what they were bringing to the table, and it wasn't clear that their role is more of a coordinating role. So maybe you need to recommend something going forward that they have part of a report explaining what their specific role is within that subject.
Lyndon seemed to clear his mind, but it wasn't written in, was it?
No.
We need to be very specific. And I welcome Gwyn and Richard's view, because they've been on this in a minute. Sorry about this, chaps. Anything else at all? Richard, what did you have in mind?
Holistically, or just on the loneliness agenda?
On the loneliness agenda to start with, because you anything you could add into that? You did say something about the voluntary bit, because you've got some insight into this.
Yes, I think that the officer suggested that that certain voluntary organisations are not working cooperatively. I think that's wrong. I think
Yeah.
there is a good network of cooperation in the third sector, and I think we ought to highlight how well the third sector has worked during the pandemic.
I think you got a good point. I was absolutely astounded what they had to say there, to be quite honest.
So, Councillor Overton, would you be happy if we made a comment to that effect?
Yes,
Yeah.
certainly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Gwyn, yeah, anything you picked up at all you think is important? Right.
Well, we could do with a couple of reports back. They did say that they were waiting for a few reports, but does that come into it?
I think what you were all alluding to was, and I think it's generic as well, is that they should provide evidence of outcomes that the PSB are generating.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, that's it, Stu, Ellen.
Yeah. So
I
that's
was
they overlapped between the different reports, didn't they?
Yes. That was the main thing. The what did astound me on the loneliness thing was actually the report writer didn't get that there was a lot going on in the voluntary sector. It was networked. Because and even Lyndon, their knowledge of what was out there wasn't as extensive as councillors was. I put it that way, shall I?
Councillor Seaborn wants to come in.
Yeah, just on one of my questions, they were going to follow up on question 5, I think it was.
Yeah.
What role did the PSB undertake in delivering blended learning?
Yeah.
So to remind them of that one.
Yeah.
Sorry, my great grandson has just arrived, so I got to go babysit him
No,
now.
you go and do that, Rose. You know,
Helen, on education.
Great grandson is good. I'm not anywhere near that, thankfully.
When we got on education, I did raise the additional learning needs code of practice.
You did, didn't you?
And the fact that that code now makes local authorities and health boards appoint designated officers.
Yeah.
And there's scope there, real scope there for the PSB to drive forward that work, particularly for early years, preschool.
Yeah. I've got consider as a recommendation, consider their involvement in early years services, identifying additional needs to provide a report at preschool stage, and PSB should have could have a coordinating role.
Yeah.
So that's you've got a fair amount on the loneliness now. Go back to the annual report. One really concrete thing we had on the data and its uses was the fire service. And I reckon they could build on what the fire service was doing, because they do very positive data. I keep having Steve Evans tell me this all the time, and they're a very good example of positive use of data. And they gave an example, which was their alarms with older people.
Yeah.
I just, well, that's wonderful. I should have remembered that as a community councillor, but that is the positive stuff. So it's building on what members and the other one was aid hucking and the retrofitting. There is good data out there. It needs to be used and something that the PSB can build on.
I've got consider the use of existing local data.
Yeah.
I raised an issue in the annual report about the quality objectives they've all got.
Yes.
And I mean, Sarah responded that it's embedded in everything they do, but they need to tell us that in the report.
The look on your face is saying something else, Peter.
No, it's just, the report. I just felt there was scope. They need to somehow, we've got to get them to tell us more about the PSB activity.
Yeah.
And I use the equality as an example.
I think that first recommendation for loneliness is actually thematic across all 3 reports.
It is.
Definitely 2 reports.
Yeah.
And I also picked up that you were kind of looking for the PSB to assess how well they'd done themselves. So, and I've picked up that you may want to recommend that an overall assessment of performance should be included for each objective or for each report or theme, to identify how they think performance has been, how they've performed in terms of outcomes.
They actually need to audit their own activities to some extent. It's some in the voluntary sector do a lot better. They need to go to a couple of TVA classes, to be honest. They do it really well, TVA. Richard's hearing what I'm saying, because a voluntary organisation, if they don't present a data, and I'm trying to make that point there, they don't get the money. It's very simple. That's what we're striving at. You know, lack of that, you don't count, and they're in the position to deliver a hell of a lot. And this is what's driving us mad, I think.
On the annual report as well.
Yeah.
You discussed the statement in there that moving to a regional PSB would negatively impact on the Blenavon project. And you've had assurances that that's not the case. So I would recommend, or I think the committee would be minded to recommend, that that statement is removed from the annual report.
Yes.
Or at least quantified.
Well, I think it needs evidencing.
Well, it just needs to be revisited, doesn't it?
It does, doesn't it? What's this project that Emma's doing in Cwmbran?
Don't know.
They kept referencing it.
Don't know.
And I wonder what it was, because I'm in Cwmbran. I haven't had it referenced. And I mean, that was, I just wanted to know what I think one question about them referencing future practical projects of PSB, we actually need to know what they are. Yeah. Can I ask that question, please? Because it would be quite...
You can make a recommendation that they include what they are, but they've already gone, so we can't really ask any questions.
No,
now.
We can't. No. What the way you word it, yeah, you're the one that does this wording well, to be quite honest. But what we need to know as part of their programme is when they said it in our questions, us knowing what their programme is for the future year in their annual report. You can ask that question, can't we? Yeah. Yes. Anything else, please? I think we got quite a lot out of that, haven't we?
Yeah.
Are you all having enough?
Sorry, I did raise that issue about there's real opportunities around the NEETs agenda for them to work in partnership. And I'd like that included. You know, because it wasn't just about the funding risk. It was about that agenda cuts into, and I did give examples where it cuts into police, housing, local authorities, education. So I'd like in their coordination role, they mustn't take their eye off that.
No, okay, we'll put that one in there, if you could, please.
Yeah, got that.
So have you got enough there now to present to them? Is it sort of rounded enough?
If you're happy for me to go away and work on the wording, then I'll come back to the chair, and then the chair can check with the rest of the committee if they're happy.
I'm just wondering whether we got it rounded enough. That's all. I do like these things to be relatively rounded. I think we got quite a bit in there, and at least they can go. And I mean, the other observation I think I do need to make is that this is the beginning. We've got the bit about the gaps, but they admitted to the gaps. We didn't need to say that, thankfully. Yeah. Okay, everybody happy now? Ooh.
Yeah. I thought we got quite a lot out of that, and big thank you to Helen for all the work she did in the background.
You did brilliantly there. Thank you, Helen. You were very good at that. Thank you all for that work there, because that was quite a bit of work. We've come in 2.5 hours, which is, I always like to aim at that. We're never going to do 2 hours, but 2.5 hours is about right. 2.5 hours and 10 minutes. All right.
There's only left really is for the time and date of next meeting. That hasn't been established just as yet, and we're working on the work programme. So the next item isn't defined yet, but I'll work with you all collectively to define the next agenda item.
Is it fairly soon?
It'll be after recess.
All right, thank you. And I just say thank you very much. I should have. I wasn't adding a date because I didn't think there was one. But this is all a bit ad hoc, isn't it? Is when and where. Right. Thank you very much, and enjoy the rest of the day.
Thank you.
Thank you for chairing the meeting.